It was like staring down a cliff into the rocky waters and knowing that you're so high up, it's going to take so long to get down, and you don't know if you're going to make it safe, but you jump anyway. This is Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan, and I'm so happy that you're here. I want to start off by saying how scary that vantage point is. Thinking about jumping off that cliff all alone. I say that to say my story really started with me on that cliff, looking down. And if I go back to the night I left and changed everything, it was literally this moment. Instead of overthinking the jump, I just did it. And everything about that night felt like some movie that I was living in. I couldn't believe that I looked him in the eye and said, "I'm leaving." And it pains me so much because I could just see the shock and pain in his eyes. I hated that. But I just knew that I couldn't go back and I couldn't stay the same. I had already jumped. So there was no reversing it. I was halfway down the cliff. The only way was down. And I was hopeful I'd survive. I trusted myself enough to believe that I would, but there was just no going back, and I knew it. From the first time that I started to really think about what jumping off this cliff would be like and ending the relationship that I'd known for I don't know, about the last year, half of my life, I took a lot of things into consideration before this night, but a lot of things I couldn't even think about or comprehend because there was a lot that I didn't know. There was a lot of this day by day scenario. But one thing that I remember the night that I left, I took a few things and my dog and went to one of my friend's house. And her and I sat there by her fire in her backyard and just kind of unpacked it all. And I just talked about it. Is this what I'm doing? I'm doing this, right? Like, is this it? But I knew I'd already done it. I think in life, sometimes we make decisions that we know we need to make, but they scare us. So we start backpedaling and we're like, wait. How do we go back to that comfortability? How do I jump back to the edge? Because I'm just kidding. I don't want to do this anymore. It's really scary. And what I will say that I learned that if you have a strong desire to jump, and not just because of a temporary inconvenience, because there's always going to be times that you're going to want to give up when things get hard. But I'm talking about not just giving up the first or the few times it gets hard. I've done things that are hard that I don't just give up. I mean, I think about the time I ran a half marathon and I'm on mile 10. I was like, what? I'm over this. I have another 5K, like 3 more miles left, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't let myself, even though it wasn't comfortable, I wasn't going to allow myself to stop and give up. And I've done that with many things in my life. So I'm not saying once you're uncomfortable, quit. But what I'm saying is if you have a strong desire, and I don't even know if desire is the right word, maybe if you know in your heart of hearts that you should be doing something differently in your life, and this is not where you're supposed to be, you've got to trust it and push through even when it's hard and uncomfortable on that side of whatever you know you want to do. So let's enter this mess. I'm talking to my friends. Everyone's in shock. Like, she left him, like, how they had this seemingly great relationship. If they're not going to work, then like, oh my gosh. And I even remember getting a message from one of my friends who had recently been divorced before me. And she didn't know we were going through the separation at this time because I wasn't really telling or sharing a lot with a lot of people. So many people didn't know. And she was just like, She had met someone after her divorce and was super happy with him, and she had texted me and said, "Hey, was thinking about you, and I'm so glad I finally understand what it feels like to be with your very best friend and have such a good relationship and be as happy as you are, just like you and your husband are. I'm just so happy." And I realized that outwardly, everyone, or at least a lot of people, saw our relationship as relationship goals, or at least from a two steps removed level. Well, I think even our closest friends saw the great in our relationship, of course, as well. But they also saw a little bit more of what I saw and what our challenges were. But I think we all know that no one's marriage is perfect. No one's relationship is perfect. No one's life and is perfect. No one's life is perfect. And we just have to kind of roll with the ups and downs with someone. But that was really hard for me because I kept thinking, wow, I had this relationship that people looked at and went, "Oh my gosh, they have a great relationship." And I'm throwing that away when there were people in my life that I knew, from my view, and from many others, had a much worse relationship in the ways of more toxic infidelity, more all of these other challenges, and they were working those things through. And then here I was, and we've been in a good place for some time now, outwardly appearing, and definitely not at the level of these others, but yet I'm giving it up. And I think that was the hardest thing for me to realize, is that, am I giving it up, or is it just not meant for me? And that's a question that I truly believe now, that the answer is it just wasn't meant for me. But it took me a long time for me to see that and to come to that conclusion. So, as I'm wandering this wild mess, I keep going back and forth. I had this really great relationship outwardly, and for a lot of ways, it really was. And now I'm just here by myself, and I don't want to do anything to give him any hope of us reconciling the relationship, because I know that I didn't make that hard choice and I didn't do all these hard things because he was my person. But it's so, and I knew that to be true, but it's so hard when you're in it because you miss that comfortability. So it's so easy to kind of want to go back to that place with that person, but I knew that that would just be unfair to the both of us. And I just didn't want to drag it on and make it any harder than it was for the both of us, especially him. So I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what to be or do. And there was these few months, like the separation and is the end of June, and I don't move to Tennessee till the following year. So during this time, it's like, what do I do? And I wasn't really gonna date in Utah. It didn't seem appropriate. We were just separated. I was still in the house. I don't even know how to date. That sounded like the most foreign thing ever. But then there's also this piece, I don't know, that I I was like, what am I supposed to do with myself? But then I remember this time that he reached out and said, "Please don't bring anyone to our house ever." And of course, that hadn't even really crossed my mind. Like, we had still had pictures of us in the house. It was our home together. I couldn't even imagine doing that, but knowing that that was something that made him feel inclined to tell me that, I knew that the whole idea of dating anyone or pursuing anyone just seemed not appropriate for me at the time. But it was also like, I guess you don't need a person after that. You just need some time on your own, but you're also in this really emotional, vulnerable place where there's just so much uncertainty that it's hard to explain. But so I'm newly single again for the first time in forever. And I don't know if there's a part of me that just missed that connection with someone, or like, I don't even know. Miss just somewhat of a connection with someone in that way, because 'cause you've had it for so long in a marriage or in that relationship you've had forever. So, fast forward, a lot happened, but fast forward before the wedding, if you listen to that episode with that mess, it was the Morgan Wallen concert at USANA Amphitheater in Salt Lake. And y'all, this I was so excited because this is, I think, end of August, early September, so, early September, and the last few months have just been so weird for me because me and my ex always had, like, camp trips over 4th of July, and there was just so much of my routine for the last forever that I wasn't getting to do anymore. I just missed my friends and missed the normalcy that I had, and so I hadn't really done a lot of things, so this was something I was super excited about and looking forward to. I was like, "Okay, we're gonna have this great night." And me and one of my girls, we were just so excited, drinks were flowing, we pre-gamed at my house. I absolutely needed this night. I had cried so many tears. Like I said, I hadn't done a lot of things. It was just such a needed experience because my whole life was so different. And it was weird to live this new life. And it's when I think back on it now, like going to Morgan Wallen single, like I don't even remember going to a concert single. And I know it's not like, oh, this big thing, but it kind of is when it's just totally different. And I know even my friend, like we had been to so many concerts together. And I don't think either of us knew that this one would feel so much different because she's married and I'm no longer married. And I'm a damn I don't wanna okay, I'm a mess. So we get to the concert, we're seeing a lot of people that we know, we're just having a great time, and we get to our seats, and there's this guy that I went to high school with, and I hadn't seen him in years, and I didn't even really know him that well in high school. I knew of him, I knew who he was, we had mutual friends, but I didn't really he was a grade younger than me, and I didn't really talk to him a ton or anything or keep up, but he was there. And I thought he was so cute, which I guess everyone did in high school apparently, but I did that night. I'm sure the Coors Lights helped, but he really is adorable. So, next thing you know, I'm just me and this guy are kinda, like, glued to the hip. We're taking all these pictures. I'm literally, like, just we just start kissing. Like, what? Like, kissing at this concert like we knew each other, and I'm just like this schoolgirl, I don't even know, and so I get my phone out and I know a lot of people give Snapchat a hate, but I had Snapchat forever in a relationship, and I used it a lot for memories, so that's been hard because now all these memories with me and my ex come up later. I didn't know this is a whole other topic. I didn't know it was used differently the way that I didn't know Snapchat was what people use for it now because 'cause I've had it so long, but, like, that's a different topic. But I end up snapping a picture of me and this guy, and I'm like, I don't know why, and this is just, like, just so bad of me because I snap us, and I suddenly think about it, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And at this time, for whatever reason, my ex is still, like, on my Snapchat, and so even though I've been drinking, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, Heather." So I hurry and look at the snap again, like, to delete it. I was like, "What am I doing?" And my ex had already looked at the snap and was like, "What is this? I can't believe you. Why would you do this?" And I'm immediately like, "Oh my gosh, Heather, like, what are you doing?" And so I hurry and like delete the snap because me and my ex have mutual friends and I don't want to like give that disrespect. And then I'm like, I don't even know why my ex is still on my Snapchat at this point. Like it doesn't even make any sense. And so I remove him as a friend from my Snapchat. And I'm just like, I don't even want to hurt his feelings like this. I don't know what I'm doing. Obviously, I'm not capable of making great decisions right now. So I'm just being messy. So surprisingly, it doesn't sober me up, but I go on with the night. We have a great time. And at this point, I have been just like glued to the hip with this guy. And my girl is so over me. Fair enough, because I've been all over this guy. And I just was the worst friend in history because I'm just enjoying the concert with this guy instead of my girl, which I hate that for me and for her. And she know who she is, and I apologized a million times. I love you, Candace. I was just so messy. So I'm with him, and we're just doing our thing, having so much fun. Then the end of the show comes, and my girl is, like, so done. So she's ready to go home and not too worried about me. And this was, like, the first time I had ever acted like that with a guy in so many years, and I'm sure for her, this was just so outside of the norm for me as her friend who we got married, like, the same year, so we had done so much together just being married, and now she's here at this concert, like, her concert buddy, and I'm, like, this single girl all over some dude, you know? And so it was another moment where I kinda looked back and realized, like, I'm changing my change of, like, who I am is, like, also affecting the people that have known me for who I was for so long. Like, this is also my friends having to kind of I don't know if they're necessarily grieving, but, like, adjust to me being different than I was for so long. It kind of changed the dynamic in your relationship of having, like, all pretty much all married friends, and now I'm, like, this single friend, and I'm making different decisions, and I'm spending time differently than I would if we were both there at the concert in relationships. Like, it definitely changes dynamics in so it's like a trickle down effect when you change an aspect of your life that changes like your identity and the kind of decisions you make because the people around you are used to you making different types of decisions and now they don't really know what to expect with you anymore because you're different. So it was definitely an interesting perspective that I hadn't really thought about before like how will my this change impact my friendships. So back to the mess, we leave the concert and he ends up inviting me back to his house and I go. And I think that it helped that I had known him for a long time or known of him for a long time, but I was also like, what am I doing here? Like take me back to like thinking about that night. It's like the first time I'm in a bed that's not mine. First time wearing a t-shirt that isn't his. Like, there's just so much weirdness in the thought, and I think there was some comfort that, like, this man, high school Morgan Wallen guy, we'll say, like, had also been divorced fairly recently. So, weirdly, I never knew that that would be a key piece in people that I would meet, is having them also understand divorce because maybe it just made me feel like a little more connected because it's just such an uproar of change and emotions. And so that kind of gave a little piece in that with him. But if you think about it, this whole thing was not really something that I had did or had done in forever. And even like in high school, I wasn't this girl. So it was just so it's such a self-discovery, and maybe some people just roll with it. I'm an overthinker, so the way I grew up, it made me overthink a lot of things that I did because it just wasn't who I was. So when I tell these stories, just think that I just didn't have that life like that. Like I wasn't this like crazy, I don't know. I was just when we go back and talk a little bit about like how maybe, and I'll touch on this, like how growing up Mormon or a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, like just having that background really like puts a lot of things in your head that you are really just it feels very weird to be in these situations even more so. So I think it's the combination of just the morals that I grew up with and then also just the change in who I was. It seems so drastic. So I think like taking both of those things into consideration, it was just a lot of change and a lot of like, what am I doing? Who am I at this time? But I remember the next day leaving his house and he was like, "Can I get your number?" Because we didn't have numbers. We just had like socials. We never texted or anything. And I was like, "Yeah, but don't fall in love with me. I'm moving to Tennessee," which is like, I don't e I was just so I don't even know who I was. I didn't even know how I was moving to Tennessee at this point, but I don't even know why I said that, but I knew I was. But I did leave my hat there, so that ended up not being the end of our story, and there's a little bit more on him, but he ended up also being a pivotal part of just this journey for me, and really kind of like a lot of how I acted in this dynamic with him a little later, like, showed me things I needed to see. So again, back to reason, season, lifetime, there was just so much purpose in that meeting, even if I didn't understand it that night. It was a critical relationship or whatever to call it. But I remember on my way home thinking, "What is even happening?" Yet again, here I am. So I just silently had to think about who I am now. The girl that was on the cliff looking down to jump, now she's hit the water almost. I mean, I don't know where I am at this time, like if I'm already in the water and I'm just trying to swim to shore still. So maybe it's I'm already hit the water, I've already jumped off the cliff. I know I'm not getting back on that cliff. I'm just treading through the water and I don't know which way to go. I don't know when I'm going to get to shore and finally understand all of this. I'm just so confused in what I'm supposed to be doing. And I think I just maybe thought it was okay because it's supposed to be messy, right? Like we don't have to have it all figured out. But I was like, who's this girl? Who's this person? It was though the first time after my ex and during my separation that I was really someone I didn't know who I was. And I just really had to think about what is this going to be like on the other side? And I know maybe for some people, my mess is just another Saturday night. But for me, it was like this whole uproar of emotions. And what am I doing was like, because I think so many times in your life, once you've been with someone for so long, like such a long period of time, I don't feel like there's just this switch that flips and you suddenly go back to someone else. I think you're like, enter this new person and now you're, wait, who am I? And you think you're older and wiser and you would just know to be like, I'm going to make these great decisions and I'm all mature because now I'm a grown woman or grown human. But maybe there's people out there that are that way. Congratulations. But I was definitely the farthest thing from that. I was I was the okay, we're just gonna roll with this and act like we never lived before and figure it out along the way. And I think it felt easy to be messy and I could justify it if I think back about it because it was like, well, look, I'm going through this really hard things. And if I'm honest, my emotions were all over the place. Like I probably cried every day pretty much for months. I even remember one time that I was in the office at work and I don't even know. I think my ex had texted me. I'm sitting there on a call in the office, and there's hardly any people in the office at this time. I think it was like a Monday. And I had to like get off the call quietly. And I just like walked out and was on like the standing in the parking lot outside the office, just bawling. And I remember I kind of pulled myself together, sat back down at my desk, and someone that worked there, like that I worked with, such a sweet guy. He he had pinged me and he was like, "Hey, just, checking in, like, are you good? I have a meeting in this, in 30 minutes, but if you need someone to talk to." And I was just like, gosh, I can't even keep it together at work, Heather. Like, what are you doing? It's so embarrassing. And I realized it's just like one of those things where like life still goes on, but here I am, a wreck, and people around me are noticing and like super kind. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm so thankful for the people in my life that gave me so much grace, but it just felt like, oh my gosh, you're a grown woman. Don't you have it together? Like, keep it together, Heather. Like, this is embarrassing. But I had also had other women that I talked to that talked to me about their divorce, and I also had some men that's another story, but that also told me about how hard it was for them. And so I think I realized it was okay to be this way, but I remember people telling me, "You're doing a really good job. You're just moving along." But I'm very good at, like, hiding my sadness because I'm very, like, outgoing and positive, and so a lot of people are like, "Oh, she has it all figured out," but I literally was crying all the time. But it's okay. It is what it is. But I knew, one of, the women that I knew told me that she, like, didn't get out of bed for a month, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't imagine." So I think I started realizing, like, what a change this was to everything that I've ever known, and I remember that I did end up getting a therapist, and I was talking about this and with her, and surprisingly, she thought at the end of our, time during the end of the separation, we were wrapping up, she thought I had it pulled together, so I don't know if I'm just good at faking it. I was trying to be authentically real, but I mean, it literally was like this death of so many things, and I didn't I did not give getting divorced the credit it deserved. I don't know if that's the right word, credit, but for its level of difficulty in your life. Like the fact that like whatever the divorce rate is, 50%, like 50% of these people out on the streets have gone through such a challenge. Like, how are we functioning as a society? It's such a traumatic thing. It's wild to me. And I'm not saying like staying in a relationship that's awful is not traumatic either. Cause I mean, it's just life is just those ups and downs. Life is just going to continue to have challenges and be messy. And no matter what, we're going to figure it out. Even when it's hard, even when we don't love it, even when we have to cry at the office and have people see. Like, I think the one thing I love about the evolution of people being more open and having more channels to share their perspectives, such as this podcast or a positive of socials, when people are vulnerable and honest of like, how was back in the day? Like, no one was like telling anyone how hard all this stuff was. Like, we were just all like, well, everyone looks like they have it great, so we're going to pretend we do. Like, I, I mean, I've been that person. I've wanted to kind of like keep the mess under the rug. But I think it feels so good now to understand that we all really were feeling different things. And the last thing I'll say about this is that, like, through that experience and the time being messy and the high school Morgan Wallen guy, and I remember his divorce was like rough, like whose isn't, I guess. But hearing a man's perspective on it is so helpful. I think so many times we just kind of want to like think about, whatever side we're on and just understand the challenges from our perspective and not really look at the challenges that the other side feels. And I think it's so helpful to kind of like give grace to it was easier for me to give grace to my husband, understanding how men felt, men that had been left by their wives, hearing how they felt and the hurt that they felt honestly helped me to be more give my ex more grace, to understand where he's coming from, to see that side in perspective. And I think that's just so necessary in life. It's easier to be like, well, I'm right and I see this and this is how I felt, and so I this is all I'm worried about. But when you kind of open your mind to go, other people have different experiences. There's two sides to every well, there's three sides, right? His, mine, and the truth. But he has feelings, they're valid just as mine. And then just trying to put myself and be like, I get it. Like I get it. This sucks. If I had to be you, like I would feel a lot of different ways too. And I guess I'm gonna kind of end this messy episode by saying, like, sometimes I think it makes it easier for us to deal with hard things when not only do we give ourselves grace, but we give grace to the other people that are feeling a certain way towards us about what we're doing. So in this instance, in this story, like my ex understanding, that Snapchat probably wasn't the best thing that he wanted to see. And that wasn't a good move on my part, given it only been a few months, right? So I understood why he was upset. And my girl at the concert, like, she wasn't happy with me. We had planned this concert for months, and then I ended up spending my time with someone that wasn't her because I made that choice to prioritize that random person over her because of the mess that I was. And that was valid for her to feel that way. Right? And so I'm going to make mistakes. I know I'm going to do things wrong. But when I do and it upsets someone that I care about in my life, whether or not they're going to be in it forever like my ex, I still think giving compassion and trying to see why they're upset and validating that is the right way to you just going, okay, now I learned. Am I going to make mistakes again? Absolutely. But I'm going to be a little bit more cognizant of the people in my life and how my choices and my messes impact them and hopefully make better decisions moving ahead. So say all that to say that it got a little messy. It will continue to get a lot more messy, but I appreciate you listening so much. So happy you're here. And until next time, this was Wandering the Wild Mess with Heather Morgan.